All right, welcome back to another episode of Cameo Podcast. I'm chilling at the patio of Red Beard, sitting across from Arjun Singh, who was gracious enough to buy me coffee today. And how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And I reached out to you back in, I guess it was February.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
been a long, long time. I
Yeah.
reached out to you February about your podcast because you're one of the original Kamloops podcasters, because there's I don't know, 7 to 8 of them out there, and yours is out there as well. Explain kind of who you are and what drew you to podcasting way back in 2010.
Well, thanks for remembering that. That's really nice of you, and it's cool to see what you're doing and the whole podcasting world. It's just an amazingly cool world for a number of reasons. Number one, anybody can do media, which is kind of a neat thing, and it's not just the province of people with big studios or big vans with like satellite dishes on it. It's really a function of we're sitting here at a patio table with a couple mics and a recorder, and off you go. And so I think that's a really cool part about internet and technology these days, is you can kind of do that in a really easy way. In 2010, I was off city council, and still very interested in what was happening in the community, and just really I was inspired by a bunch of podcasters that I've been listening to all over the world, and it was kind of neat seeing how they were bringing a very authentic voice to just to the world. And so a lot of traditional media is very prepackaged. You have your minute, you have to say it in a certain way, you have to say it in a certain voice. This is completely, whatever you want to say it however you want to say it, and if it's real and if it's true, it's typically quite compelling. And different people will kind of gravitate towards different things. So some folks never listen to whatever I put on online. I'm sure the same happens for you, but you build a group of people who are very interested and want to know kind of what you're doing, what you're saying. So it was exciting, and it's exciting to see what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I remember reading your letter into Kamloops this week about having that conversation with media and trying to bridge the gap, and that got me really excited. So much so that I recorded like a screencast of kind of me reading the article and
really?
shared it with a couple of people. Yeah, to be like, hey guys, I think this would be really, really cool if we did this, this, and this, right? And
cool, man.
Yeah, I think you're right in the sense that it's really medium anyone can jump on, and a large part of this project was trying to give access to this pipeline that I've kind of created to see if someone wants to put their voice in it, and just ship it, right?
Yeah.
I think Kamloops has an issue with
Interesting
complaining.
analogy for BC these days.
Yeah, I'm very tactful with how I explain that, right? I think there's some people can take that however they want, right?
Cool.
I also use the analogy of it's a digital performing arts center, right?
Totally.
Kamloops, wants to complain, but no one wants to get down in the trenches and start shoveling and building something themselves, right? And with the internet, I think anyone can build anything.
Yep.
And the analogy is no one on the internet knows your dog.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And I mean, I'd say that I'm lucky. I mean, as a city councilor, I've been doing this for almost a decade. You get to see so many cool things that have been built in Kamloops and have been building. So, and I think this is the next evolution of that in many ways. One of the next evolutions of that is what people can do with digital media and do with their own thoughts and their own ideas. I think it's completely in keeping with a lot of the culture and a lot of the stuff we built over the years for the last 125 years of this community. That's my thought. But I think also that one of the cool things is this whole democratization of speech in the media, right? So the newspaper has a set amount of paper, radio and and CBC have set amounts of airtime they can devote to this kind of stuff. But I listen to podcasts, I'm sure you have too, that go on for 3 hours,
Totally.
And they're neat to listen to. I mean, and so someone to hold someone's attention for that long of a time is pretty awesome, right?
Yeah.
So it's a neat thing, and it's also really, and also I think that the idea of actually using some journalistic kind of like principles that are really good principles about ethics and structure is also really good, and I see in that what you're doing, and I think that's really awesome.
Well, I think that's where I draw the line of myself not being a journalist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a difference between just documenting something and then actually cutting up the documentation into a story that translates organically or properly, right? Like,
yep.
And I've definitely gotten in, a couple tussles with the journalists since being back at the newspaper, right? But I think the work they're doing, and you can see it with the responses of the fires recently, right? Like how they are adapting and wanting to change, right? But also make sure that they're informing the public accurately, which the whole city is almost documenting, reporting it, right? And they're allowed to almost pull it together and make sure the story is accurate, right? Like there's still that vetting process that the media needs to do. That's
a huge thing. I mean, because I think that there is a lot of things on social media and on even pictures people post over that are just they're not accurate in terms of the whole community's set of facts that we have.
Totally.
And the good job of journalism. And I'm not saying I've called myself a journalist at times, right? Because I'm not trained, I'm not paid to do that. But if you bring those ethics to it, I think that you have the right to be called that in some ways. Because I think it's ultimately there's a really important, huge function for someone or some people to actually be trusted purveyors of information, right? And when you get a journalist, and that happens from time to time, that's not doing that in an above board kind of a way.
Yeah.
A provincial or federal journalist, I don't think that happens much locally at all. You get a situation where that true trust is kind of abused, right? But when anybody can have, so people can be unethical as paid journalists, and people can be very ethical as unpaid journalists.
Yeah.
And when I use the word journalism, I'm basically saying, hey, look, I mean, to sort of try and get a set of facts that people can trust or can go through and trust, and be transparent about what your biases are. I think that's something about that I really find very puzzling about some of the sort of journalism principles, as they call it. Often you hear this word objectivity. Well, no one's objective. Like, there's no one in the world who's objective. I mean, we all come from our biases. We all come from editorial sort of base. I mean, and the best you can do, I think, is be transparent about what those are.
Totally.
These
are my ignorances. These are where I will have issues. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I grew up a son of a brain surgeon. There are people in town typically who've been around a while know that, and they know that I've had a very privileged background in many ways, and I hope that people also know that I care about. Because of that experience, I also feel very lucky, and I care about folks who are struggling, as an example, right?
Yeah.
That's something people can. So now I've said that, people can say that's bullshit, or people can say, yeah, that's on the up and up. That's something you put out there because you're a public person, and people can make their decisions as to what they want to do.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think people can really judge people for their backgrounds to judge them as a character, right?
Yeah, character, right?
And I'll use my analogy of SoundCloud rappers because I told you I'm obsessed with them.
Yep.
The latest kid in the news was XXXTentacion, who, yeah, he was a monster, but he was trying to make himself better near the end, right? And you could see the progression of him, yes, he was, I don't want to justify what he did, but I can appreciate who he was trying to become.
I have no idea who and what you're talking about, but keep on going.
Yeah, like it's, that's... I thought maybe you had seen him in the news because it was this like really he was murdered, right? And he was like a guy who came up from the internet using SoundCloud.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's one of those right, like he's been translated as like the Tupac of my generation.
That I understand a little bit better.
Yeah, right. Like, but like,
how old are you?
I'm 25.
Yeah, okay, I'm almost 50, so I'll be 49 this year.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe my analogies might not always make sense, right? But
I hate that I'm getting old. It just sucks, I'm missing all this stuff out,
No, I don't think you're missing out on anything. I think like we can look around, the Tron-Kill corridor. We can now see the fruit of what the people before us have been building towards.
Yeah, and I don't want to. It's always a team effort, but I can see the efforts of councils that I've served on here too, which is pretty cool. So I mean, like, I'm never gonna say it's all about at all about one counselor or even a council in a term. It's really about a succession of groups building in the community, and not even people on council as well as people in the community at large who are doing awesome things. So, but it's cool to see Electron Kill Corridor and see what's happening, and you kind of feel like, this what we're doing here is, it could be an awesome part of that, too, right? Just that kind of documentation of things that are going on.
Totally, and that's what I think is kind of a shame that your podcast got lost in the sands of time, right? Because there's powerful information that might be lost.
Well, you inspired me to actually go back to my hard drives, which is something I don't often like to do.
I get that. I've actually wiped computers so I don't look at parts
of
my
really?
life. Yeah, I don't have. I have one school project from my whole 4 years left.
Oh,
Everything
boy.
is gone.
Wow. Well, no, and those are those podcasts I did. Frankly, I didn't know anybody would ever listen to them, right? So I mean, when you contacted me, and I remember the contact in February, and I was feeling kind of like, geez, a long time ago, right? And also I was feeling that it shouldn't be lost to the sands of time. So I'm sure there's sitting somewhere on a drive, so I have to kind of look for them and see.
I'm also obsessed with the idea of archiving to look back to see how people have changed, but also sometimes things should be lost to the sands of time too, right? Because that way you can kind of bury it and move on.
It should be an intentional decision, though, right? For me, it wasn't really an intentional decision. It was more like, okay, they're up on the line, then the provider goes down, and I'm like, okay, well, that's it. I mean, you get busy in different parts of your life, and you sort of move on to different things. But my life now is more interesting than it's ever been, and it's just neat to be able to document that stuff, or just even give thoughts about that stuff. And I have to be, I live in a very community-oriented world, so sometimes strong opinions, you have to be pretty careful about how you express them. You have to sort of pick the hills you want to sort of go up, and
I've been advised by a few people
and potentially die on. You're fine. I mean, it's cool that it's good to have people who are really pushing and advocating for various things, and they don't really have any desire or really need to look at the whole kind of picture. And there's people who are good look at the whole picture and kind of sort of work, around tables and stuff rather than working kind of on the street. And I've always kind of had that tension between those two things in my life. But I'm probably more of a sort of a meeting guy, which sounds kind of boring, but it's actually pretty effective in many, many ways.
Totally. And to go back to the topic of new media, are you familiar with Common Sound, Studio 322, Zach Abney, and that kind of...
Common Sound I've heard of, yeah.
Yeah, so you should check out what they've been doing with Avenue Media House. They've been doing these Facebook live streams where they'll have two guests on, and they've got the TV cameras changing, and they got animations,
cool.
and the whole 9 yards.
It's like a big TV show. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so it really is. It's a new evolution of broadcast is available, and you're very good at it. Just using the selfie stick, throwing the phone up, and pressing record, right? And there was one lady who was asking, how do you do this, Arjun? What's the tricks, right? And there really is no tricks. You just...
Well, and you've been... I mean, I've been around this for a long time. People often will ask, how do you not get upset with people who are kind of criticizing on Facebook? And I've just been in that world for a long time, right?
Yeah.
It's probably part of my personality in a way, too. I do delete comments the odd time, and, because people are just getting totally overboard, but I don't like to do it at all, so I let people go for I give them a lot of leash. And the video and audio stuff, I just find it really compelling, really interesting. And, it's something, again, way back, I'm talking probably 2003 or 4, I bought a software program for my Windows computer that had a green screen background.
Yep.
I forget what it's called now even. And I was putting adding sort of the things behind my... but like a newscast kind of a thing.
So, I get it. Cool.
Lower thirds and stuff. So I've been playing with this stuff for, a long time, I guess. And, even when digital cameras first became a thing in 95, I remember I bought one of the first, and that's when I financed my digital camera. And I remember I was pretty bad about paying that thing too for a while. So I was getting, bills from them and collection notice kind of letters. But it's so compelling and interesting. If you look at, people just blasé. People give will sell you a phone now, and they go, it has, gesture animation, and it has facial recognition, and it has all, and you're like, I remember when, like, there was no internet.
Yeah.
And the world just completely changed. And a lot of times, even in the sort of political world or the media world, most of social media gets a pretty bad rap, I feel.
Yeah.
But it's such a powerful thing to connect with people and to show them who you are, to learn who they are, and hopefully to build trust. I mean, it can be used the other way too, completely, right?
Absolutely.
But it's like this awesome, powerful enhancement of both good and both bad, right?
Well, that's kind of like one of the things that did inspire me to create a podcast, right? Is how do you control your data and who you are online? Well, you need to own your own platform.
That's
right.
Good.
And
yeah.
so, like, I was like, well, maybe I want to migrate off Facebook, and I'm kind of doing that in a really odd manner to slowly actually disappear off Facebook and just be like, okay, if you want to know who I am, maybe check it out here, because maybe I don't want to always be sold to, right? And that comes from a digital marketing salesperson, right? Like, you want to know where your information is going and controlling that. And I think we're starting to become cognizant of where that information goes too.
Yeah. Have you heard of Seth Godin?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so Seth Godin is this guy who, like, he talks about relationship marketing and trust marketing, and that's where social media is so powerful. Like I'll actually sign up for things.
Yeah.
Like, I'll sign up for, like, double XL running shirts because it's hard to find, and I'm a bigger runner than you are physically, right? I'll sign up for things on, community sort of news. I'll sign up for things on good scotch, But those things that I want to get, right?
Totally.
I'm excited when they appear in my inbox. Oh yeah, what's the latest coolest thing, like podcast equipment, right? But it's that kind of like sort of like old school mentality that if I put a banner up or if I just try to put something in front of you all the time, you're going to be interested in it.
Totally.
So how do you? And the problem with that kind of relationship marketing, where you're just giving people what they want to see all the time, is how do they learn new things? So I think in terms of individuals, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that the internet and digital technology, social media can eventually create a bubble around us that things are kept out from.
Absolutely, yes.
And we need to actually not let that happen to us, because as a citizen, one of the things I'm very interested in is the whole notion of citizenship and how people become better citizens. And it's really around that notion of learning about a diverse range of things, about exposing yourself to new things. So although I consider myself a center-left person, probably a center, right on something, but center-left on probably a lot of things, I'll like put on Fox News in my car on my satellite radio, or I'll put on even like the really crazy stuff like Patriot NRA radio, and I will listen to that because I don't want to get out of touch with what those people are saying, and some of it I find actually really valid and really compelling, right?
No, I that's why I like talking to everyone, right? You can agree with someone without agreeing with what they're saying, right? Like and walking that line, right? Or not even walking the line, just going, hey, that's fine. How are we going to work together to better ourselves, society, and the community, or however it be, right? And so it's an interesting place, and that's why conversations are kind of so powerful, and that's why we're seeing regular people online becoming popular, right?
Yeah.
And creating like these really talk shows that as big as Ellen or even bigger perchance, right? Because people are watching 4 million people are watching this person, where only 500,000 people watched this.
I was reading today this morning about Caitlyn Jenner, formerly Bruce Jenner's stepdaughter, who's like, obviously they're famous for being famous.
Yeah.
But she has millions of followers on Instagram, on Twitter, whatever. And she's gone in the last few years. She set up a cosmetic company.
The $900 million.
Yeah, $900 million now. It's kind of like, it's just crazy, right? But even like people who are not obviously, famous to be, or known to be, or famous for being famous, like just people who are grassroots, who have the desire and the interest and the drive. That's an amazing thing about the internet, is that like someone like came from essentially nothing,
Yeah.
And actually, that's why there's a guy actually I should connect you with a guy named Kruba Shankar. He lives in India. And Kruba, I met him, watching him. He was blogging many years ago, and I connected with him. And my wife and I, when we got married in 2003, went to India, and I was traveling around, and I met him there, face to face, went to his house, and he's like just taken off. He's got all these he's columnist for papers. He's a professional speaker, comes from a very modest background, obviously from a country that isn't on the media world landscape kind of thing. But you don't need like that whole what's 1,000 true followers thing, right?
Yeah, that's Seth. No, yeah, it's not even Seth Goes. That's like a blog post from like 2007.
Yeah,
1,000 True Fans is like one of the most iconic blog posts for anyone who's wanting to get into like digital entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so if you solidify that with people, you don't need everybody. You are actually, if you do that, you're probably going to, a lot of people are not going to like what you're doing. They're going to be upset by what you're doing. They may have a vociferous negative reaction to what you're doing. Hopefully not. But you have a strong group of people who are supporting it, right?
Yeah.
And I've experienced that as a community representative. I mean, if I go out and say, I really believe in this, there's people who are going to say, well, I really don't,
Totally.
And what you hope that turns into is respectful, collaborative conversation. It doesn't actually have to lead to agreement. This has to lead to respect, Unfortunately, a lot of times that's not what happens, but I think we keep on trying to push that and try and promote that in terms of there's a lot that I can learn from you, a lot you can learn from me, a lot I can learn from someone who would, not ever vote for me. It's all good stuff, It's all really important stuff to have in a community, and you're bringing it to Kamloops. Kamloops is an amazingly diverse community with lots of different types of people here, and it's just kind of a neat place. It's a microcosm of a really of our world in a way, because there's so many different kinds of people here, and it's neat to actually be here and see that and try and leverage that and empower that.
Yeah, and when you think about it, 1,000 True Fans out of a city of 90,000, right? That's, if you could talk to 1 out of 90 people in Kamloops, that's a lot of change that could happen. If
I mean, 1,000 people swing elections in this town. 1,000 people, definitely 1,000 people would get, would support a restaurant or support a podcast or support a whole bunch of things. But I think the interesting thing about new media is that it's new, so you have to kind of, I think, let people kind of learn about it and kind of, 15 years ago, we probably couldn't get 1,000, strong fans in digital media.
Totally.
Like now you can.
Yeah, really what I should be doing is translating all of my podcasts into Facebook videos.
Yeah.
Right? And because that's where people are listening, right? Whether I want to or not, that's another story, right?
Well, then if you build that audience up there, maybe I'll go with you.
Totally. And that's kind of where this podcast kind of started with, there's so many reasons it started, but one of the reasons was a bet after my buddies spent a couple bucks buying me 10,000 fake Instagram followers.
Oh,
and then
really?
we had $1,000 bet that I could rebrand it as take my Nevin Webster Instagram and rebrand it to something completely else. And I think they won't pay me, but it's been a fun experiment, right? I do things to prove people wrong at times, and
Good.
I think that's.
I like that.
I think that's some good motivation, right?
Yeah.
People telling you no, you can't do that, because one of the things someone actually said to me early on was you're not going to find enough interesting people in Kamloops to talk to.
Oh, come on!
And I'm like,
how can someone say that?
I don't know.
That's crazy.
This morning I was actually. I slept in, but
me too.
I used to get up at 5 a.m. all the time, right, because of my work situations, and I wanted to just go to the farmer's market and hand the mic to someone, see what happens, right? And I think just having someone chat with just their voice, right, and they can be anyone, they could change their name, be anything, right? It's so powerful, especially you could look at Dear Abby's success, right, and listening to that on the podcast by the CBC podcast, the marketing one, Under the Influence,
yeah,
right?
Terry O'Reilly.
Yeah, right. I missed out on his talk. I was really, really sad about that. I was caught up at the family function. I had tickets ready to go, and I was
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of people, and obviously with the internet, you can access all that sort of his stuff all the time, or whoever's stuff, right? So, one of the most probably transformative things for innovators in the way of education is just having TED Talks online, right?
Totally.
You can go, and even other sort of TED Talk-ish kind of things. So, I mean, I'm anything. My tire in my car is deflated. I have to go. I suck at that. So I go on YouTube, figure out how to do it, right?
Yeah.
I remember my nephew when he was learning how to tie a tie. I mean, I helped him, but he was on YouTube checking things out. There's all this stuff that goes on now. And it's amazing because I think people, again, become blasé about it. You don't really... I mean, my dad grew up in the 40s and 50s and 60s in India, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the world was very small. I mean, he took a ship to America in 1960.
Oh, wow.
And, rough seas, whole 9 yards. He was a total pioneer in so many ways in his generation. But now where life is so everything is so immediate, right? And there's good and bad to that. Like, if you can't really turn off from things. I mean, you could, but it's very challenging actually to put away your cell phone and
it's so hard. My wife's like, oh, you promised me when you quit your job and found a new one that you would be on your phone less. You're on it more now. It's like, I'm sorry.
I have to give my wife my cell phone when we're having dinner.
Maybe I should use that trick.
Because I'm like, I know I'm going to look at it. So here, take it, because she gets upset too, which she should, right? It's just ridiculous. But the cool part about that is that every piece of knowledge, like the Library of Alexandria in ancient times, or Library of Congress now, or it's all accessible.
Well, even the local library renovating, right, and changing, like. The biggest thing I miss about my hometown of Cambridge, Ontario, is the library. There is so progressive and innovative.
Huh.
Why?
What's up with that? How is it so progressive and innovative?
I don't know. They've developed such an amazing. It really is the hub of the art scene in Cambridge, in my opinion.
How big is Cambridge?
130,000.
Okay.
Cool. It's very similar to Kamloops in the sense that blue collar along the river. And size-wise, and a lot of the issues I'm seeing here, right? They're happening there, just on a bigger scale, right? Been watching this YouTube video of this guy named Ryan Coles. He has a YouTube channel called Tree Camps, because he's going in and cleaning up the tree camps because of the homelessness and addiction issues in Cambridge, Ontario, and it's insane.
Wow.
We're talking just fields and fields of garbage, right?
Yeah.
And then you look at what some people are doing here, I checked out the Love Hard cleanups with Amy.
Yeah.
And
do you know Glenn McLaughlin's the last name? He's a homeless. Well, he's been a homeless in and out in town, and he used to document a lot of the street life on YouTube and on Facebook and stuff.
Here in town?
Yeah, here in town. He's a neat guy. He's a big white flowing beard. And he's obviously got challenges in his life, but he's been kind of a sort of documenter. And, I ran into last year at Canada, and he was telling me that I think he got banned from one of the things, whether it was Facebook or whatever, he got banned, and he had to find something else to post on,
Interesting, yeah.
But he's a really neat guy, and I really appreciate that kind of insight into that group of people, right? Because most people, they're shunned, right?
Totally, yeah.
And so he really gives us, I think, as a community, some insight into that world. That if you have a phone with a data plan or a Wi-Fi access, it's very easy to do.
Yeah, and it's kind of like one of my favorite, I guess, photographic displays I've seen online is the people who jump on the rails and the life that they've had on the rails. Though it's illegal and stuff, but it's just wow, these kids are something so wrong. No, I don't want to say wrong, but something so there that forces them to do something really, really dangerous and live on a ratty mattress, in what seems like a coal mine of a dirt piled train yard, right? And finding those people who are doing that stuff, I think it does a huge service. I spent some time on living at a hostel in Toronto, hanging out with people, for a week there, and to kind of see their struggles. And one of the cool things I heard is there's going to be a street rag being made right now.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, so looking forward to see that.
It's going to be awesome, man. I think, and part of what I'm really excited about, and it's also very challenging for someone on city council in a way to kind of interface with, but I'm working on trying to figure out how I can encourage everybody in the city to do that. We have a whole bunch of people now who are people who've had a history of homelessness, maybe aren't now or maybe are now, people who have mental health, and they're very upfront, they're very active, and they're interfacing with the sort of city council and with the community and saying, look, we have a voice and we want to be heard.
Totally.
And that always kind of happened in some small ways, blips here and there, last 10, 15 years. But my sense is it's more now. I think it's really, really good. But the hard part is that how to make those two worlds meld in a really powerful way.
Yeah, well,
because people say we want a summer shelter now, and we're like, we got liability, we got location, we got to figure out how to make sure neighborhoods aren't unduly impact. We got to make sure that drug dealers aren't just kind of coming around and causing. So there's a whole raft of issues, but that sort of grassroots passion and concern and desire, can really work well with the whole okay, here's all the things we have to do to get there.
Yeah.
But it can be challenging in the beginning because people are like, well, you're just kind of giving us a hard time, and we're trying to work hard. And and other guys, you're not working hard enough, Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, you use the tools that you have and employ the energy that you got, right?
Yeah. And worlds. I mean, one of the things I'm really jazzed by is when worlds can connect and meld, and we can sort of use the sort of power that everybody has to sort of individually do things collectively. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the main powerful driving forces of social media is that element of collaboration, right? And
it is. Yeah, it can be. I mean, I think again, the idea of that big tool that can be used for competition and bashing somebody else over the head, or used for collaboration, right? So, I mean, I think that we should romanticize social media, and we shouldn't also demonize it either, right? We should kind of figure out, how we all individually want to use it, and use it to promote the things we want to promote. I mean, when I do one of those videos that you've seen on my Facebook, I watch the view count, right?
Yep.
Probably a bunch of it's me, but it gets 400, it gets 1,000, and 1,200, and I feel like, wow, that's I'm reaching all these people with a message that I think is really important to sort of talk about, and values I think are important to our community. That's cool.
Yeah, totally.
But at the same token, and I think it's a small group of people myself that vandalize the silent light power things.
Yeah,
that gets amplified too, and people get really anxious about that.
Yeah,
and so you want to try and make the good kind of shine.
But you can tell the flip side of the story of the people who are vandalizing the Trans Mountain thing, saying denied, spelled incorrectly, right? And I think we can boil all the vandalism up to people need education, right?
Yeah.
Education on both sides. And I can kind of leave it at that, right? Not to get too crazy political. I use the pipeline word for my content because, I think Kamloops has a huge opportunity in taking some of the money away from LA in content creation, and because we got what Mastermind's doing.
Yeah, what's LA?
Like Los Angeles, that Hollywood entertainment industry, right? If 98%
I'm so
of
square, eh?
What's that?
What's LA?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like 98% of the entertainment industry goes to Hollywood, right?
Sure.
Only 2% is coming to online media, and
totally. And one of the things you said, which I think is good to build on, is people need education. People need to be also touched in their heart and need to find people that they trust. And I really believe that what you're doing, Nevin, is you're touching a lot of people in their heart. You're building trust with the community, and that's really, really powerful and really, really important, right? And it's also a lot of responsibility in a way over time, because you kind of start to think, well, okay, how do I hold this in the best way possible, right?
Well, that's where the democratization and people got to call me out on my shit.
Yeah.
Right. I'm trying to be as open and as honest as I possibly can. I'm I don't think great of myself at times, right? But that's why, you got to say those things, right, to make everyone be their best, right, and try and be a better citizen.
Well, that's it. And I think no one's perfect, right? And no one. But I think the best we can all do is try and move in the direction of goodness and try and move in the direction of what a community is. And there's plenty of times when you're making a hard decision, for example, as a city council member, where you're like, wow, did I really get that right?
Yeah.
But you gotta stand on the work that you've done. You gotta try and explain it to folks, and people get upset with you sometimes. You gotta go through that too. But it's really a question of always thinking about what's good in life, what's I think love based, what's heart based.
Yeah.
And also what serves the most number of people, but also keeps in touch with the people who are maybe smaller groups who have real big issues, right? So it's a pretty cool thing you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, Arjun, and I've taken up enough of your time, so we'll kind of close it up there.
I appreciate it. I'm gonna try and find those podcasts. And
awesome.
I will send you the links when I get them up.
Oh, awesome. And if people want to reach out to you, where it's the best place to connect? Given that you're so social media.
My blog is arjunsingh.com or yourkamloops.com. I'm also available at obviously off the city website, but my personal email is Arjun, ARJUN, @fullworld, all one word, .com. And just Google Arjun Singh Kamloops, you'll find me.
Perfect. Yeah, make it nice and easy. You're great at reaching back to people, in all honesty. And I think that's the future of social media. It's two-way communication. That as long as goals align, things move forward. It's great. Well, thank you once again.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping this great tradition going.
Yeah, it's. I'll be coming back with more Cameo podcasts. I'm trying to get back into that one a week, and hopefully the quality is going to just go up and up and up from here as I try and hone my skills. Thank you. Bye-bye.